What if I told you that the best animated film of the last decade, maybe the best animated film DreamWorks has ever made, isn't Shrek. It's not How to Train Your Dragon. It's not Kung Fu Panda. It's a movie about a talking cat in boots that most people wrote off as a cash grab sequel before it even hit theaters. What if I told you that this movie, this Puss in Boots sequel, contains one of the most psychologically rich villain portrayals in all of animation? That it tackles mortality, ego, identity, and the terror of being truly, genuinely afraid in a way that would make most live-action dramas blush with embarrassment? What if I told you that somewhere between the swashbuckling sword fights and the fairy tale references and the comedic cat behavior, this movie made grown adults cry in theaters? Not just misty-eyed. I mean full-on sobbing. Because here's the thing, Puss in Boots, The Last Wish arrived in December of 2022 with relatively modest expectations. People thought, okay, it's been 11 years since the first Puss in Boots movie. Antonio Banderas is back. There'll be some jokes, some action, some fairy tale world building. Fun for the family. Maybe a solid 7 out of 10. Move on. And then people actually watched it. And something happened that rarely happens in cinema anymore. Everyone was completely blindsided. Critics were floored. Parents sitting next to their kids in the theater found themselves processing something deeply personal. Film enthusiasts who pride themselves on being hard to impress were posting about it online for months. The film currently sits at 95% on Rotten Tomatoes and boasts one of the most passionate fan bases of any animated film released in years. So today, we are going to dig into every single layer of this movie. We're talking the full story breakdown, every plot beat, every character arc, every hidden symbol and thematic thread. We're going to talk about what makes this film's villain genuinely terrifying. We're going to talk about the animation style that was deliberately chosen to make this movie feel unlike anything else DreamWorks had ever done. And we're going to talk about why a movie featuring a fairy tale cat dealing with mortality might be one of the most emotionally honest films about death and ego and the meaning of a good life that Hollywood has produced in a very long time. Strap in, because this is going to be a long one. Get your snacks. Get comfortable. And let's get into it. Section 2, Movie Overview, Setting the Stage. Puss in Boots, The Last Wish was released on December 21, 2022, distributed by Universal Pictures and produced by DreamWorks Animation. The film was directed by Joel Crawford, who had previously directed The Croods, A New Age, and co-directed by Januel Mercado. The screenplay was written by Paul Fisher and Tommy Swerdlow, with a story by Crawford, Fisher, and Tommy Swerdlow. Now, let's be real for a second. When you hear sequel to a Shrek spin-off directed by the guy who did the Croods sequel, you are not exactly primed for a cinematic revelation. And that's exactly what makes this movie's success story so remarkable. Nobody saw it coming. Not in the way it actually arrived. The voice cast is phenomenal. Antonio Banderas returns as the eponymous Puss in Boots, and we'll talk at great length about how his performance in this film is arguably the best voice work of his career. Salma Hayek reprises her role as Kitty Softpaws, bringing depth and wit and a genuine emotional undercurrent to a character who in the first film was charming but somewhat underdeveloped. Harvey Guillen joins the cast as Perito, a small, relentlessly optimistic therapy dog who becomes one of the emotional cores of the entire film. Florence Pugh voices Goldilocks, yes, that Goldilocks, in a performance that is surprisingly layered and full of conflict. John Mulaney and Wagner Moore round out key roles, and we will absolutely get to both of them in full detail because their contributions to this film cannot be overstated. The film is set in a fairy tale universe, a heightened, stylized world that blends Spanish folklore, classic storybook aesthetics, and a contemporary visual language that draws heavily from animation traditions you wouldn't necessarily expect DreamWorks to reference. We're talking Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse levels of intentional artistic reinvention. The animation style was deliberately shifted away from the hyper-realistic CGI that DreamWorks had been using for years and towards something that feels more like a moving painting, more expressive, more stylized, with bold outlines, painterly textures, and an almost comic book sensibility in the action sequences. Culturally, the film arrived at an interesting moment. 2022 was the year that animation, particularly non-Disney animation, was fighting to prove its artistic legitimacy to a mainstream audience that had largely been conditioned to view animated films as children's entertainment first and genuine cinema a distant second. The massive critical and commercial success of Spider-Verse in 2018 had cracked open a door, and The Last Wish walked through it with extraordinary confidence. The original Puss in Boots film from 2011 was a perfectly enjoyable, competently made adventure film. It had Antonio Banderas being effortlessly charming, it had decent action, it had a serviceable story about betrayal and redemption. It was good. It wasn't great. It made its money and found its audience and then sort of faded into the background of the DreamWorks catalog without leaving a particularly deep impression. So the expectation for this sequel was a pleasant, forgettable animated adventure film. Maybe something you watch with the family over the holidays and enjoy without necessarily thinking about for the rest of your life. What audiences got instead was a philosophical meditation on mortality disguised as a swashbuckling fairy tale adventure. What audiences got was one of the most genuinely frightening animated villain introductions in years. What audiences got was a film that respected their intelligence and their emotions in a way that big studio animation rarely does. Let's get into the story. Section 3, the full story breakdown, scene by scene, beat by beat. The opening, a legend at his peak. The film opens with the kind of grandiose, operatic flourish that perfectly establishes who Puss in Boots is as a character, and more importantly, who he thinks he is. We're in a lavish Spanish-inspired city, and Puss is being celebrated like a god. He's serenading a crowd, striking poses, doing that thing he does where he makes every single moment of his existence feel like the climax of a legend. He is told there's a giant terrorizing a nearby town and he leaps at the opportunity. Not because he's particularly concerned about the people, let's be honest about that. He leaps at the opportunity because this is what Puss in Boots does. He fights giants. He slays monsters. He is the hero of his own story, and he has been for a very, very long time. The fight with the giant is gorgeous. It's kinetic and fun, and the animation style here gives the whole sequence this incredible sense of weight and momentum. Puss dances around this enormous creature with complete confidence, and you understand immediately why he is a legend. He's incredible. He's fast, he's bold, he's theatrical, and he knows it. Oh, he knows it. And then the giant, in a clumsy, almost accidental moment, steps backward onto a bell tower and sends the whole structure crashing down on top of Puss. And Puss doesn't survive it. Not fully. He wakes up with a doctor telling him the truth. The fall killed him. He used up another life. Which would be fine, because Puss in Boots, as every cat does, has 9 lives. Except this isn't the first time something like this has happened. This isn't even close to the first time. The doctor calmly, almost clinically informs Puss that this was his 9th life. He has 1 life left. One single, solitary, ordinary life, just like everybody else. Watch the way Puss reacts to this information. Watch it carefully. Because this moment, this specific beat right here, is the entire engine of the film. Puss does not react with grace. He does not react with wisdom. He does not have a beautiful, cinematic moment of quiet reflection. He panics. He completely, utterly panics. The great Puss in Boots, the legend, the swashbuckler, the cat who has danced on the edge of death for his entire life and never once flinched, is terrified. Completely and genuinely terrified of dying. And rather than sitting with that fear, rather than confronting it, he does the most human thing imaginable, he runs from it. He retires. He hangs up his hat and his sword and goes to live at a cat sanctuary owned by a woman named Mama Luna, and he tries to disappear into domesticity. Into safety. Into the anonymous, quiet existence of an ordinary house cat. He renames himself Pickles, for crying out loud. This is a spectacular storytelling choice. Because we're only 10 minutes into the film and already the movie has done something extraordinary. It has stripped its protagonist of the one thing that defined him, and revealed the raw, frightened creature underneath the legend. The movie is essentially asking, who is Puss in Boots when he can't afford to be reckless anymore? Who is he when death is actually real? The discovery, the wishing star. Living at the cat sanctuary, surrounded by other cats, Puss tries to be ordinary. It's painful to watch. He's clearly miserable. He clearly does not know how to be small. And then, while hiding from the world, he hears a rumor that changes everything. The wishing star exists. More specifically, a magical map exists, a map that leads to the last wish, a single wish that can grant the finder their heart's deepest desire. And if that wish exists, then Puss knows exactly what he wants, all 9 of his lives back. A reset. A full restoration. The ability to return to being the legend, the swashbuckler, the cat who never has to confront the ordinary terror of mortality. Now, here's where the film introduces its extraordinary ensemble of antagonists and complications, and this is where things get genuinely brilliant. Because Puss is not the only one who wants that wish. Not by a long shot. The Big Bad Wolf, the film's true masterstroke. Before we move into the other characters pursuing the wish, we need to stop and talk about the most important character in this entire film. Not Puss. Not Kitty. Not Burrito. The character who makes this movie work on every level is the villain, and his name is Death. He's never explicitly called Death for most of the film. He's introduced as the Big Bad Wolf, a terrifying, dark, imposing figure who appears with an orchestral sting of dread that genuinely makes you sit up straighter in your seat. He carries 2 sickles. He whistles a haunting, simple tune that the film uses with incredible effect throughout its runtime. And from the moment he appears, he does something that most animated villains never do. He is actually scary. Wagner Moura voices Death, and the performance is extraordinary. There's a quality to the voice, this low, patient, almost amused register, that communicates something deeply unsettling. Death is not in a hurry. Death does not rage or posture or monologue. Death simply arrives, and the world grows quieter around him. The film introduces him with a scene that is, and I want to be precise about this, one of the most genuinely frightening scenes in the history of DreamWorks Animation. Puss is at a bar. He's trying to get information about the map. And the Big Bad Wolf walks in. And every person in the bar goes completely silent. They clear the way. They look at the floor. Because something in the fundamental biology of living creatures recognizes what this thing is, even before your rational mind can articulate it. And Death looks at Puss. And he smiles. And he tells Puss that he has come for him. Not with anger. Not with malice. With a kind of gentle, inevitable certainty. The way a tide comes in. The way night follows day. He's simply here. He's been here every time Puss has thrown his life away carelessly, every time he's gambled a life on a spectacular stunt, every time he's been reckless because he could afford to be. Death has been watching. Waiting. And now that Puss only has one life left, now they're going to really get acquainted. Puss runs. Of course he runs. The great Puss in Boots, who has never run from anything in his life, runs. And the film lets you feel the weight of that. This is not played for laughs. This is played as genuine, visceral, almost existential fear. And the audience feels it. Because even beneath the fairy tale aesthetics and the talking cat conceit, what you are watching is a character coming face to face with the thing that every living person on Earth eventually has to confront, the knowledge that they will die, and that there is absolutely nothing they can do to outrun it. The whistling motif that Death uses throughout the film becomes one of the most effective pieces of sound design in animated film history. Every time you hear those notes, that simple, almost childlike melody, your stomach drops just slightly. The film conditions you to feel dread at the sound of it, and it earns that response completely honestly. Goldilocks and the Three Bears crime family. Now let's bring in the other players, because the script does something smart here. It populates the world with multiple factions all pursuing the same wish, and each of them represents a different kind of desire. Goldilocks, voiced by Florence Pugh with remarkable warmth and complexity, is hunting the wish for a reason that takes a while to fully reveal, but which lands with genuine emotional resonance when it does. She's grown up as part of the Three Bears crime family, Big Jack Horner's rivals, essentially, but also her surrogate family. Mama Bear and Papa Bear and Baby Bear, who are all criminals, yes, but who clearly love Goldilocks deeply and sincerely. The joke, of course, is that Goldilocks has always been looking for the thing that's just right, and the film uses that iconic fairy tale detail not as a throwaway wink at the audience but as the actual psychological engine of her character. She wants to belong somewhere. She wants to feel like she fits. She loves her bears, but she's human, and there are moments when the gap between her and them is impossible to ignore. She wants the wish to, well, we'll get to it. Florence Pugh brings something genuinely vulnerable to this role. There's a scene later in the film where Goldilocks' motivation is fully revealed and the emotion in Pugh's voice is completely unguarded. It's a beautiful performance in a medium and in a role that didn't demand it, and yet she delivers it anyway. The three bears themselves are a delight. They're over-the-top crime family archetypes given genuine warmth through the specificity of their family dynamic. Mama bear's protectiveness, Papa bear's gruff affection, Baby bear's absolute devotion to Goldilocks. These aren't throwaway gag characters. They're a real family, and their love for each other is real, and the film respects that. Big Jack Horner, the pure, uncutted of villainy. And then there's Big Jack Horner, voiced by John Mulaney, and O.O. This character. Big Jack Horner is Little Jack Horner from the nursery rhyme, grown up into a ruthless, sociopathic pastry magnate who has dedicated his life to collecting magical items and artifacts, not because he believes in their power, not because he has some grand philosophical agenda, but simply because he wants to be the most special, most powerful person in any room. He's not tragic. He's not misunderstood. He has no wounded backstory that explains his villainy. He is simply, comprehensively, unapologetically selfish. John Mulaney's voice performance is one of the film's great secret weapons. There's a particular register that Mulaney has, this quality of cheerful, almost performative reasonableness sitting directly on top of complete moral vacancy, that makes every single line reading from Big Jack Horner genuinely funny and genuinely unsettling at the same time. He's the embodiment of a certain kind of evil that isn't dramatic or operatic, it's just relentlessly, tediously self-interested. He wants what he wants and he doesn't particularly care about the impact on anyone else, and he's not even interesting enough to be properly villainous about it. In a film with multiple antagonists, Big Jack Horner is the one who's played most purely for comedy, but even he has a moment near the end that lands with surprising thematic weight, because the film uses him as a specific, pointed example of what not wanting to examine your own desires actually looks like in practice. The team assembles, and Perito changes everything. Back to Puss. He's retrieved the map. He's trying to pursue the wish alone, because alone is how Puss operates. He is the legend. He doesn't need partners. He doesn't need help. He doesn't need anyone. And then Kitty Softpaws appears. She wants the map. There's history between them, complicated, painful history, the details of which are parceled out through the film with good pacing and genuine emotional payoff. They were engaged once. And Puss left her at the altar. Not cruelly, not maliciously, he left because he couldn't commit, because he was too much in love with his own legend, too consumed with the idea of Puss in Boots the icon to be present for an actual relationship with an actual person. The tension between them is real and earned. Salma Hayek plays Kitty with a kind of brittle dignity. She's been hurt, she's guarded, she's not going to let it happen again, but she's also not going to pretend she doesn't care. The dynamic between Puss and Kitty in this film is genuinely one of the best romantic arcs in a DreamWorks film since, honestly, maybe ever. Because it's not played as a cute will they won't they. It's played as two people who genuinely wounded each other trying to figure out if they can trust each other again. And then there's Perito. Perito is a small dog, a chihuahua mix of some kind, wearing a little sweater, relentlessly, impossibly, almost philosophically cheerful. He latches onto Puss and Kitty and simply refuses to leave. Harvey Guillen voices him with this warm, earnest quality that makes the character immediately, instinctively lovable. He's a therapy dog. He approaches every terrible situation, and there are many terrible situations in this film, with a kind of unshakable gentleness that the film initially presents as naive but gradually reveals as something far more profound. Here is the thing about Perito that the film earns beautifully over its runtime. He is not cheerful because he has been fortunate. He is not optimistic because his life has been easy. Perito, we gradually come to understand, has had a genuinely difficult existence. He has been overlooked, abandoned, dismissed. And he has made a conscious choice, or maybe it's something deeper than a choice, maybe it's a kind of grace, to be present, to be kind, to find the good in the moment he's currently in. In a film about a character who is terrified of death and terrified of loss and can't stop running from the present moment, Perito is the quiet philosophical counter-argument. He is what it looks like to fully inhabit your life without needing it to be anything other than what it is. And the film doesn't beat you over the head with this. It lets it emerge slowly, organically, through the accumulation of small moments. And when it lands, when you finally understand what Perito represents in this story, it lands with the force of something genuinely true. The dark forest, into the heart of the fairy tale. The three of them, Puss, Kitty, and Perito, make their way toward the wishing star, which lies at the center of a dark, enchanted forest. The wishing star exists in a place called the dark forest, and the forest is not metaphorical, it is a genuinely treacherous, magical, dangerous place filled with the kind of fairy tale imagery that the film uses with real creative intelligence. The film populates this journey with beautifully designed set pieces and genuinely creative encounters. There are sequences here that demonstrate the full power of the film's distinctive animation style, the way the film uses stylized motion blur in action sequences, the way the environment responds to the characters with a kind of expressive, almost subjective quality, the way the color palette shifts and breathes with the emotional temperature of each scene. And then death appears again. Every time death appears, the temperature drops. Literally, the color palette cools. The music shifts. That whistling motif cuts through whatever is happening and your entire nervous system responds to it. And each time death encounters Puss during this film, the encounters escalate in their intensity and their psychological weight. The film is building toward a confrontation, and it is doing so with extraordinary patience and craft. Puss's fear escalates too. We see him flinching at things he never would have flinched at before. He hesitates in moments where the old Puss would have leapt. He is so consumed by the terror of losing this last life that he is, in a very real way, already not living it. He's so afraid of dying that he's stopped living, and the film is very deliberate about making you feel the tragedy of that. Goldilocks' big reveal, what she actually wants. The groups inevitably collide multiple times in the forest, and in one of these collisions comes the scene that reframes Goldilocks as a genuinely sympathetic character. The reveal of what Goldilocks wants to wish for is handled with real delicacy. She wants to wish to be part of a real human family. She loves her bears, but she knows she doesn't quite fit. She wants to finally belong somewhere that makes sense. And then, in a moment that is genuinely moving, Mama Bear tells her something. She tells Goldilocks that she is family. Right now. In this moment. That belonging isn't something you find by being in the right circumstances, it's something that exists in the love that's already present. She already has what she's looking for. She just can't see it because she's too busy searching. Florence Pugh's voice breaks slightly in this scene and it is perfect. It's the right emotional note, not melodramatic, not overwhelming, just the small, quiet crack of someone realizing they've been running towards something they've had all along. And the film earns this moment completely because it has spent the entire runtime building the genuine warmth between Goldilocks and her bears. This moment also functions as a thematic mirror for Puss, because Puss too has what he needs. Right there. Kitty. Perito. The present moment, the life he's currently living. And like Goldilocks, he can't see it yet because he's too consumed with chasing something that he thinks will fix everything. Big Jack Horner's reckoning, brief but pointed. Big Jack Horner's arc throughout the film runs as a dark comic counterpoint to everything else that's happening. He's collecting magical creatures and artifacts and generally causing chaos and destruction everywhere he goes, and the film plays it largely for laughs. But there's a moment near the end where the film offers him the same opportunity it offers every other character, the opportunity to examine what he actually wants, what he actually needs, whether what he's chasing is really going to give him anything. And Jack Horner refuses. He declines the opportunity with cheerful, complete indifference to self-examination. He wants what he wants and he doesn't care about the why. And the film lets him have that. It doesn't punish him with a dramatic redemption arc he hasn't earned, and it doesn't suddenly pretend he's a complex tragic figure. He is simply, purely, irredeemably selfish, and the film's treatment of him is honest. Some people are just like that. Some people would rather have the trophy than the growth. The satirical edge here is sharp. Jack Horner is a portrait of a particular kind of ambition, the kind that is entirely hollow at its center, the kind that accumulates without ever feeling satisfied, the kind that confuses having things with being something. And the film puts him next to characters who are genuinely working through real desires and real fears, and the contrast is devastating in the best possible way. The final confrontation, Puss faces death. Here it is. The moment the entire film has been building toward. And I want to spend significant time on this sequence because it is, and I genuinely believe this, one of the most meaningful scenes in the history of DreamWorks Animation. Puss has found the wishing star. He has the map. The wish is within reach. And death arrives. This fight is nothing like the opening sequence with the giant. The opening fight was a ballet, graceful, theatrical, confident, the embodiment of Puss in Boots at his most legendary. This fight is something else entirely. It is desperate and frightened and raw. Puss is not fighting with confidence. He is fighting with the clumsy, unelegant energy of someone who is genuinely, sincerely terrified of what happens if he loses. And death fights back, not with rage, but with that same patient, inevitable quality. Every time Puss lands a blow, death simply absorbs it and keeps coming. Because that's what death does. You cannot outfight it. You cannot outrun it. You cannot outswagger it. And then comes the moment. The moment the film has been quietly preparing you for across its entire runtime. Puss stops fighting. He sheathes his sword. He stands straight. And in a voice that has none of the swagger, none of the performance, none of the legend, in the quietest, most honest voice Antonio Banderas has used in the entire film, Puss says something to the effect of, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." And he means it. Not because the danger is gone. Not because death has somehow been defeated or neutralized or outsmarted. He means it because somewhere in this journey, through his reconnection with Kitty, through his growing affection for Perito, through the accumulation of real moments with real people who actually matter to him, he has stopped running from his life and started living it. And when you stop running from death, death loses its power over you. Not its inevitability. Its power. The thing that makes death terrifying is not that it will happen, it's the time and energy and life you spend running from the fact that it will happen. The fear is worse than the thing itself. Death smiles at this. The big bad wolf backs away. And in that smile, in that gesture, the film gives us something extraordinary, the idea that death isn't malicious. Death is not the villain. Death is just the natural end of a life, and the only way to truly defeat it is to live so fully, so presently, so completely that when it comes, you have nothing left to regret. It is a remarkable sequence. And Wagner Moura's voice performance in it, that low, almost gentle delivery, gives death a kind of terrible grace that makes the moment land even harder. The wish and what Puss actually chooses. So Puss gets to the star. He has the wish. And here is the question the film has been leading to for its entire runtime: what does he wish for? All 9 lives back. That's what he came for. That's the whole journey. That's what set everything in motion. Does he take it? He doesn't. He tears up the map. He lets the wish go. Because all 9 lives back means 9 more lifetimes of the legend, 9 more lifetimes of the performance, of the reckless bravado, of the carefully maintained distance from anything real. And he doesn't want that anymore. Not after Kitty. Not after Perito. Not after standing in the forest and feeling the warmth of belonging to something real. He has one life. One ordinary, precious, unrepeatable life. And he is going to live it. This is the thematic culmination of everything the film has been building, and it is delivered with the kind of earned, genuine emotional weight that can only come from a film that has done the work. You believe this choice. You believe it because you have watched Puss change, slowly and honestly, across the film's runtime. You believe it because you've seen what he's found and you understand why it's worth more than 9 more lives of what he had before. The emotional landing, Kitty, Perito, and the life ahead. The film's resolution is quiet and warm and exactly right. Puss and Kitty begin rebuilding their relationship, not as a grand sweeping romantic conclusion, but as a tentative, hopeful beginning. There's a gorgeous visual callback to their earlier dynamic, handled with real grace by both Banderas and Hayek. And Perito, wonderful, extraordinary Perito, turns out to have been adopted by the three bears throughout the course of the journey without anyone quite noticing. He has found his family. Not because he wished for it. Not because he chased it. Because he was present, and kind, and open, and it found him. The final image of the film, the three of them, Puss and Kitty and Perito, moving forward together into an uncertain but fully inhabited future, is genuinely beautiful. It doesn't wrap everything up in a perfect bow. Puss still has only one life. Death is still out there. But he is not running anymore. And that, the film tells us, is enough. That is, in fact, everything. Section 4, Character and Performance Analysis, Going Deep. Puss in Boots, the legend becomes a person. Antonio Banderas has been playing Puss in Boots since 2004, when the character first appeared in Shrek 2. In those early appearances, Puss was largely a comedic device, a parody of Zorro, a swaggering, self-important caricature whose humor derived from the incongruity of putting that level of dramatic ego in a small, fluffy cat. What Banderas does in The Last Wish is something fundamentally different. He strips the character down. The swagger is still there in the early going, beautifully, specifically there, but Banderas plays the fear underneath it with extraordinary vulnerability. When Puss is told he has one life left, you hear something shift in the voice. The performative confidence doesn't disappear all at once, it chips away, gradually, over the course of the film, and what's left underneath is something genuinely human. The key to Puss as a character in this film is the distinction between the legend and the cat. The legend is the persona, the hat, the boots, the sword, the stories. The cat is the actual creature, frightened, lonely, struggling to connect, desperate for something real. The film is about the cat reclaiming his life from the legend. And Banderas communicates both layers simultaneously, throughout the film, with remarkable precision. There's a scene mid-film where Puss is talking to a mirror, essentially talking to his own legend, to the image he's constructed of himself, and the pain in Banderas' voice in that moment is completely unguarded. He sounds genuinely lost. And for an actor best known for charismatic, confident performances, that kind of vulnerability is a real artistic risk, and it pays off completely. Kitty Softpaws, the heart that stayed closed. Kitty is one of the film's most carefully constructed characters, partly because the film is so disciplined about not letting her be simply the love interest. She has her own agenda, her own wounds, her own intelligence and skill set that exist entirely independent of her relationship with Puss. Salma Hayek plays her with a kind of elegant emotional restraint that is genuinely difficult to pull off in animation voice work. Kitty doesn't broadcast her pain. She's been hurt and she's built walls and she's gotten very, very good at maintaining them. But Hayek through line readings that have a particular quality of controlled softness, lets you see the person behind the walls without ever making Kitty seem weak or pitiful. The arc of Kitty and Puss's relationship in this film works because the film is honest about what went wrong between them and patient about how long it takes to rebuild trust. It doesn't wave away Puss's abandonment with a quick apology and a montage. It sits with the damage. It makes Puss earn the possibility of reconciliation slowly and imperfectly. And that honesty is what makes the ending of their story feel genuinely earned rather than convenient. Perito, philosophy in a dog sweater. I have already talked at length about what Perito represents thematically. Let me add here that Harvey Guillen's voice performance is one of the most quietly extraordinary things in the film. Guillen brings a quality of warmth and earnestness to Perito that never tips into saccharine or annoying, no small feat for a character who is relentlessly, cheerfully optimistic in the middle of several life-threatening situations. The genius of Perito is that he is never mocked by the film for his outlook. In a lesser film, Perito's cheerfulness would be the object of humor, the butt of jokes, the naive character who eventually gets a rude awakening. In this film, Perito's perspective is validated. He's right. He is the wisest character in the story. And the film communicates that without being preachy about it, which is a remarkable tonal achievement. The reveal that Pirito has actually been adopted by the three bears during the journey, that he found his family simply by being himself, by being present and kind and open, is one of the film's most quietly satisfying emotional resolutions. Death/the Big Bad Wolf, the villain who isn't a villain. Wagner Moura's death is the most interesting antagonist in DreamWorks history. Not the most dramatic, not the most powerful, not the most theatrical, the most interesting. Because the film does something genuinely bold. It refuses to make death villainous in the conventional sense. Death is not trying to destroy Puss out of hatred or malice or some twisted agenda. Death is simply inevitable. He's there because that's what he is. He's not the bad guy. He's the truth. The design of death is extraordinary. This dark, hooded wolf figure with glowing yellow eyes and twin sickles, moving with that unhurried patience that makes every single appearance more unsettling than the last. The fact that he whistles, that his signature motif is this simple, almost gentle melody, is a stroke of genius. Death shouldn't be loud. Death shouldn't announce itself with roars and explosions. Death comes quietly, in its own time. The final scene between Puss and Death, where Puss stops fighting and Death backs away, is made possible entirely by the film's careful, patient construction of who Death is. If Death had been a more conventional villain, this ending wouldn't work. But because the film has established Death as a force of nature rather than a force of evil, because it has built Death as something that can be respected rather than defeated, Puss's final choice resonates with real depth. The idea that Death acknowledges Puss's courage, that backing away is a form of respect, a recognition that Puss is now worthy of the life he has left, is one of the most quietly beautiful ideas in the entire film. Goldilocks, searching for just right. Florence Pugh's Goldilocks is the film's best argument for why even supporting characters deserve full emotional arcs. Goldilocks starts as what appears to be a fairly standard animated villain archetype, tough, confident, criminal, and gradually reveals layers of genuine vulnerability and longing that make her one of the most sympathetic figures in the story. The just right motif is threaded through her characterization with real skill. She keeps testing things, situations, relationships, her sense of belonging, and finding them not quite right, not quite fitting. And the film's resolution for her, the realization that what she was looking for was already in front of her, in the form of a family of bears who loved her completely, is thematically and emotionally consistent with everything the film has been building. Pugh brings a physicality to her vocal performance that is impressive. You can hear her moving through the scenes, hear the posture and the gestural quality of the character in her line readings. It's a technically accomplished performance wrapped in genuine emotional honesty. Section 5, Themes, Symbolism, and Subtext. The central theme, learning to live with mortality. This is, at its core, a film about a character learning to live with the knowledge that he will die. Not someday in the abstract. Soon. With only one life remaining, Puss confronts what every conscious human being eventually has to confront. We are finite. The time we have is limited. And the question of what we do with that time, whether we spend it running from the fact of our mortality or whether we spend it actually living, is the most important question any conscious creature can ask. The film handles this theme with remarkable maturity for an animated family film. It doesn't pretend there's a magic solution. It doesn't offer a cheat code. The resolution isn't Puss gets his 9 lives back and the problem is solved. The resolution is Puss accepts his one life and discovers that one fully lived life is worth infinitely more than 9 wasted ones. This is Epicurean philosophy, the ancient Greek philosophy of Epicurus, who argued that the fear of death was the greatest obstacle to human happiness, and that accepting mortality was the necessary first step toward a genuinely good life. And the film presents this idea not as a lecture, not as a philosophical treatise, but as the emotional journey of a small cat in big boots. It works because it trusts the audience, all ages of the audience, to feel the truth of this idea without having it explained to them. The 9 lives, a metaphor for how we live. The nine lives conceit isn't just a fairy tale detail. It's a metaphor for the kind of immunity from consequence that a certain kind of privilege or luck can bestow. When Puss had 9 lives, he could be reckless because the cost of recklessness was manageable. He could burn bridges because he'd have other chances. He could refuse to commit because there was always going to be more time. This maps onto a very recognizable human psychological pattern. We often live as if we have unlimited time, burning through relationships, avoiding the difficult work of growth and presence and genuine connection, telling ourselves we'll get to it later. And the film is saying, what if you don't have unlimited time? What if this is it? Would you live differently? The answer the film gives is, yes. Yes, you would. And yes, you should. Start now. The legend versus the life, identity and performance. One of the film's richest thematic threads is the tension between the legend Puss has constructed and the actual life he's living. Puss in Boots: The Legend is a performance, a character, almost, that the real cat has been playing for so long that he's lost track of where the performance ends and the person begins. This is a deeply contemporary the me. In an age of social media and personal branding and carefully curated online personas, the question of whether you are living a genuine life or performing a life for an audience is one of the most urgent psychological questions of the moment. The film locates this question in a fairy tale universe, but the resonance with modern life is unmistakable and intentional. The moment when Puss sheathes his sword in front of death is the moment when he stops performing. He is, for the first time in the film, maybe for the first time in his life, simply himself. No legend. No performance. Just the cat, standing in the dark, choosing presence over performance. And it's enough. It's more than enough. Death as teacher, the inevitability that sets you free. The film's most radical idea is that death, properly understood, is not the enemy of a good life but a prerequisite for one. It's only when Puss confronts the reality of his mortality, really confronts it, stops running from it, stands still in front of it, that he becomes capable of actually living. This is a profoundly countercultural message in the context of commercial American cinema, which tends to treat death as the ultimate villain to be defeated, the obstacle to be overcome, the thing that the hero's journey must ultimately prevent. In this film, the hero doesn't defeat death. He makes peace with it. And that peace is presented not as resignation or defeat but as the most courageous thing he's ever done. The wishing star, be careful what you wish for. The wishing star functions as a very specific kind of MacGuffin. It's not just a plot device but a thematic test. What does each character actually want? And is that want, if satisfied, going to give them what they actually need? Goldilocks wants to belong. She already belongs, she just can't see it. Big Jack Horner wants to be the most special. He already thinks he is. He just can't feel it because no accumulation of things can satisfy the kind of emptiness. Puss wants his lives back. He doesn't need them, he needs to value the life he has. The film is saying that wishes are projections of our fears, not our needs. We wish for what we're afraid we don't have. And the act of wishing, the act of outsourcing your well-being to some external magical solution, is itself a form of avoidance. The real work is not finding the wish. The real work is figuring out why you wanted it in the first place. Purito as the philosophical ideal. Purito represents the film's positive vision, not a wish, not a legend, not a performance. Just presence. Just being fully in the moment you're in, with the people around you, with gratitude for what is rather than anxiety about what isn't. There's a Buddhist quality to Purito's worldview, this idea of radical acceptance, of finding joy in the present moment rather than chasing happiness in some imagined future. And the film makes this philosophy not a preachy message but an embodied reality. Burrito is joyful. He's genuinely joyful. Not because his life has been easy, but because he's made peace with what it is. He is the model, and the film earns the right to hold him up as such. Section 6. Technical and Artistic Review. The animation style, the boldest visual choice DreamWorks has made in decades. Let's talk about the animation, because it deserves extended attention. The decision to shift the visual style of The Last Wish away from DreamWorks' standard photorealistic CGI aesthetic was a genuinely radical creative choice, and it is entirely, completely the right one. The film draws explicit inspiration from the aesthetic revolution of Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse, bold outlines, expressive exaggeration, frames that hold in motion-held poses the way a comic book panel holds a moment in time. But The Last Wish isn't imitating Spider-Verse, it's finding its own expression within this expanded visual language. The action sequences are extraordinary. The film uses a technique in which characters are animated on fewer frames per second during intense action, creating a kind of stylized, almost stuttering quality that gives each movement a graphic boldness. Swords trail light. Characters leave after images in the air. The world itself seems to respond to emotion, color saturating when tension rises, backgrounds bleeding and blurring during moments of psychological intensity. The design of the dark forest is particularly breathtaking. This is a place that feels genuinely fairy tale, dangerous, lush and beautiful and threatening simultaneously. The production design clearly drew from a rich tradition of illustrated fairy tale aesthetics, think Arthur Rackham, think Golden Age children's book illustration, and translated that flat, pattern quality into a three-dimensional animated environment with remarkable skill. The character designs are wonderful. Goldilocks's design walks a perfect line between her fairy tale iconography and her criminal tough girl persona. The three bears have real physicality and presence. And Death is just a perfect design achievement. The dark cloak, the glowing eyes, the sickles, the patient stillness of the figure. Every frame Death appears in is a composition worth framing. Sound design and music, the whistled motif that changed everything. Heitor Pereira composed the film's score, and it is one of the best musical achievements in DreamWorks Animation. The score draws on flamenco and Spanish musical traditions in a way that honors the film's cultural setting without reducing that culture to pastiche. There are moments where the music swells with genuine operatic grandeur, and moments where it pulls back to almost nothing, leaving the sound design to carry the emotional weight. But the real masterstroke is Death's whistling motif. A few notes. Simple. Almost childlike. The kind of melody you might absently whistle while walking somewhere. And the film uses it with surgical precision throughout its runtime to build and maintain an atmosphere of dread that would be impressive in a live-action horror film, let alone an animated family movie. Sound design more broadly is exceptional. The film understands that animated films often underuse sound, that the tendency toward constant music and constant dialogue leaves no room for silence or texture. The Last Wish is not afraid of quiet. It understands that silence, properly used, is one of the most powerful tools in a filmmaker's arsenal. Direction, Joel Crawford's quiet triumph. Joel Crawford is not a household name. He came into this project without an obvious track record that would suggest the specific kind of emotional and artistic achievement that The Last Wish represents. And yet the film is consistently, impressively well directed, paced with intelligence, emotionally calibrated with real sensitivity, and visually composed with genuine artistry. Crawford's greatest directorial achievement is tonal. This is a film that has to be simultaneously funny and genuinely frightening, light-hearted and emotionally devastating, a swashbuckling adventure and a meditation on mortality. Getting those registers to coexist without undermining each other is extraordinarily difficult, and the film pulls it off consistently, from the first frame to the last. The pacing is excellent. The film moves with purpose. It's never slow, never self-indulgent, but it also never rushes past its emotional beats. Every moment that needs space to breathe gets space to breathe. Every piece of comedy lands because the film has earned the lightness. Every emotional beat hits because the film has built the architecture that supports it. Crawford's handling of the death sequences in particular demonstrates real directorial maturity. Those scenes require a tonal seriousness that could have felt incongruous in an animated family film, and he commits to them completely. No winking at the audience. No undercut by a quick joke. Death is presented with full weight and full respect, and the film is better, infinitely better, for it. Editing and pacing. The editing by James Ryan is clean and confident. Transitions are smooth and purposeful. The film's intercutting between the various factions pursuing the wish is handled with real skill, building tension across multiple storylines without losing clarity or emotional investment in any of them. There's a particularly well-edited sequence in the third act where multiple storylines are converging simultaneously, and the cutting between them builds genuine momentum and dread without becoming confusing. It's economical editing in service of maximum emotional impact, which is exactly what good editing should be. Section 7, Critical Review and Comparisons. Strengths. The film's greatest strength is its thematic ambition, and the execution of that ambition with real artistic and emotional skill. This is a film that is genuinely about something true and universal and important, and it communicates that something through story and character and image rather than through dialogue and exposition. That is the rarest and most valuable quality in cinema. The ensemble of characters is exceptional. Every major character has a genuine arc, genuine motivation, genuine emotional truth. The villain is one of the best animated villains in years. The comedy is actually funny, not in a frantic, self-conscious way, but in the way of a film that is simply good enough at being itself to be funny naturally. The animation style is a triumph. The decision to move away from photorealism and towards something more expressionistic was courageous, and the film proves definitively that this was the right call. The visual language of The Last Wish is distinctive and specific and beautiful in ways that the more conventional DreamWorks aesthetic simply couldn't have achieved. The performances are uniformly excellent. Banderas does his best work in the franchise by a significant margin. Mulaney is a comedic revelation. Mora's death is haunting and perfect. Weaknesses. No film is perfect, and intellectual honesty requires acknowledging where The Last Wish doesn't quite reach the heights it's aiming for. The film's middle section, the journey through the forest with the various factions converging, occasionally loses some momentum. There are a few sequences that feel slightly longer than necessary, and a couple of jokes that don't quite land with the precision of the best material in the film. Big Jack Horner, while brilliantly voiced and genuinely funny, is occasionally more of a narrative convenience than a fully integrated part of the thematic architecture. His arc, or deliberate lack of arc, makes a pointed thematic statement, but there are moments where his presence feels like a diversion from the film's more emotionally weighty storylines rather than a complement to them. The film's resolution for Goldilocks and the Bears, while emotionally satisfying, arrives slightly quickly. The moment of Goldilocks's realization that she already has what she's looking for is beautiful but could have been given a few more minutes of development to really marinate. These are relatively minor quibbles in the context of a film that succeeds so comprehensively on so many levels. The weaknesses don't undermine the achievement, they just acknowledge that even exceptional filmmaking exists in a range. Comparisons. Where does this sit in the animated canon? The comparison to Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse is inevitable and fair, both visually and in terms of the kind of artistic ambition on display. Both films represent animated franchises that could have coasted on existing goodwill and instead chose to challenge themselves, to ask what animation can do rather than what animation reliably delivers. The Last Wish is also productively compared to Toy Story 3, another sequel that arrived a decade plus after its predecessors and used the passage of time to engage with genuinely adult themes about loss and change and the meaning of a life. Both films succeed by treating their audiences capable of genuine emotional engagement with serious ideas. The Pixar comparison is interesting because for so long, Pixar occupied a unique position as the studio that made animated films capable of this kind of emotional depth. The Last Wish doesn't just approach that benchmark, it genuinely meets it, and in a few specific ways surpasses it. The film's engagement with mortality is more direct and less metaphorical than most Pixar films, and its philosophical implications are more explicitly stated, if never heavy-handedly so. Within the DreamWorks catalog, this is the best film the studio has ever made. I'll put that unequivocally. How to Train Your Dragon is magnificent. Kung Fu Panda is excellent. The Last Wish is better than both. It is operating at a higher level of artistic and emotional ambition, and it achieves that ambition with a consistency and a grace that will ensure it is being talked about for decades. It is also worth noting what this film represents for the franchise context it comes from. This is not just a Puss in Boots film, it is the best Shrek universe film, full stop. Better than the original Shrek, which had wit and heart but also a somewhat shallow emotional core. Better than Shrek 2, which was funnier but less ambitious. This film, this Puss in Boots sequel, is the franchise's genuine masterwork. The film's cultural legacy. In the 2+ years since its release, The Last Wish has accumulated a cultural footprint that continues to grow. The Big Bad Wolf, Death became an immediate icon of the internet film culture ecosystem, GIFs, memes, fan art, YouTube analyses, all proliferating with the organic energy that only genuinely exceptional cultural objects generate. More significantly, the film's core message, about mortality, about the value of a fully lived present life, resonated with adult viewers in a way that revealed something interesting about the cultural moment in which it arrived. Post-pandemic audiences, many of whom had been forced by circumstance to confront questions of mortality and the value of time and connection in ways they hadn't expected, found the film's themes unexpectedly resonant. It arrived at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right message. Section 8, Final Verdict and Closing Thoughts. What this film is really about. Puss in Boots, The Last Wish is about the way we avoid living. It's about the elaborate mechanisms we construct, legends, personas, the relentless pursuit of more lives, more status, more accumulation of everything, to avoid sitting still with the terrifying, beautiful, heartbreaking, irreplaceable fact that we are alive right now, and that won't be true forever. It is about the courage it takes to stop running. To put down the sword and stand in front of the darkness and say, I know you're there. I'm not pretending anymore. And to discover, in that moment of total honesty, that the life you've been so afraid of losing was worth living all along. It is about friendship. About love. About the difference between a legend and a person, between a life performed and a life actually lived. About the extraordinary gift of a creature like Perito, someone who has simply, fully, generously decided to be present for whatever happens, and what it means to have that kind of presence in your life. These are enormous ideas for any film to carry. For an animated sequel to a Shrek spin-off, featuring a talking cat in boots and a fairy tale narrative about a wishing star, to carry them with this level of grace and artistry and genuine emotional power, that is something remarkable. That is, genuinely, an achievement that deserves to be celebrated. Who this film is for. It is for children, who will love the adventure and the comedy and the extraordinary action sequences and will absorb the film's deeper messages in ways they may not fully understand until they're older. It is for parents who will watch it alongside those children and find themselves unexpectedly processing something real and personal and true about their own lives. It is for film enthusiasts who need evidence that mainstream commercial animation can be genuine art. It is for anyone who has ever been afraid. Which is to say, it is for everyone. This is a film that works on every level it's operating on, for every audience it's speaking to. That is extraordinarily rare. Treasure it when you find it. The final rating. So what does Puss in Boots, The Last Wish get from me? It gets a 9 out of 10. And let me be precise about that rating, because a 9 doesn't mean almost perfect with minor flaws. It means something I think about long after the credits roll. It means something that changed the way I look at what animated films can do. It means something that did exactly what the very best cinema does. It told me something true about being alive. The minor narrative inconsistencies, the slightly uneven middle section, the big Jack Horn rock that doesn't quite integrate as seamlessly as everything else, these are real, but they do not diminish the film's achievement. A9 is a film that, a year later, 2 years later, you find yourself coming back to. Not just for the action or the comedy, but for the feeling of it. For what it did to you the first time you watched it. The Last Wish gave us one of the most compelling animated villains in years. It gave us a protagonist arc of genuine psychological depth and emotional honesty. It gave us a visual style that reinvented the aesthetic language of DreamWorks Animation. And it gave us, underneath all of that, a simple and radical and urgent message: you have one life. This is it. Put down the sword. Look at the people around you. Be here. That message, delivered with this level of craft and care and love, in a movie most people dismissed before they saw it, that's not just a good film. That's something close to a gift. Closing remarks, a word to the audience. If you haven't seen this film, watch it tonight. Watch it with someone you love. If you can. Don't let the animated sequel framing fool you into thinking this is background noise. This is the real thing. This is cinema doing what cinema is supposed to do. And if you have seen it, if you're here because you already love it and you wanted to hear someone articulate why, then I hope this did justice to the film you carry with you. Because films like this deserve to be talked about at length. They deserve the analysis. They deserve the care. They were made with enormous care, and they merit it in return. Puss in Boots, The Last Wish. 9 out of 10. An absolute masterpiece. DreamWorks' finest hour. And proof, absolute, undeniable proof, that the most profound thing in the world can arrive in the most unexpected packaging, if you're paying attention. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if this video meant something to you, drop it in the comments. Tell me what this film did to you the first time you saw it. I have a feeling this is going to be a good conversation. I'll see you in the next one.
Move now! Fireworks are our cover!
This way, through the crowd!
Got the goods, go! Wow, we're really above the clouds! This beanstalk is incredible! Keep going, the top awaits. Venid a mí, guardias! Probad mi acero! It's swaying! Hold on!
I can't hold much longer! We're falling! Help!
Humpty, it's been a long time. Puss, you haven't changed a bit. We have much to discuss, old friend.
Look at the scale of it. Are we ready for this?
Yes, let's begin the ascent. Get down here, cat!
You'll have to catch me first!
Insolent beast!
Too slow!